But once you accept that life is difficult, it's no longer difficult. And that's the whole thing about mindfulness and being aware, being mindful of how we're being, and this idea of realizing that by not saying yes to life, by not embracing what you're doing, you don't have the ability to accept it. And once you accept it, then you can do something about it. No struggle, no swag.
Yeah, we're going to ask about that later.
But it came out of it. It just came out of that wisdom that I'm telling you about, because I live in flow a lot. We all can live in flow, but if we can be still, there's a wisdom, there's a creativity that comes out of that. We know when we get in the zone and flow, but there's flow triggers.
Raw, uncut, and unapologetic. Welcome to Men Talking Mindfulness.
All right. Today, we've got the absolutely legendary mindfulness coach, George Mumford, with us. He has worked with superstars like Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, Phil Jackson. You may have heard of those folks. And he's coached Fortune 500 execs and even prison inmates, helping them all unlock their full potential. We're going to get into his book, Unlocked, and the concept of discovering your masterpiece within here shortly. Check the show notes for more on George, and of course, listen to our show and hit mentalkingmindfulness.com to see what else we're up to as a podcast. Will, great to see you, my friend. George, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
We're so
great
excited
to be here.
for this.
Yeah, very excited. We said that already a bunch of times already. So.
Yeah. So with us being so excited, we absolutely need this one breath grounding practice to get ourselves settled before the show, and for you, our audience, to get you guys settled, because I know you're excited to hear from George as well. So let's get into that. So go ahead and get settled and find a place and a mindset that is comfortable and safe for you. And let's begin by emptying our lungs. Bringing our navel to our spine, emptying, holding empty, and then a nice deep, slow breath in, holding full at the top, feeling that fullness, feeling the now, and letting it go, letting it go. All right, and now bring some movement back into your body. Maybe open up your eyes if they were closed. And man, I can't help thinking, with such a legendary mindfulness coach, I'm like, oh, I wonder what George is thinking about my one breath grounding practice. So anyhow, George, great to have you here, sir. We're going to jump right in, with your book, Unlocked. What do you mean? There you go. Will's holding it up there to the side.
Great book.
What do you mean when you say unlocking your masterpiece within?
Yes. So we were born, we have a masterpiece. We have a divine spark, Buddha nature, Christ consciousness, whatever your language is. We're whole and complete. We just don't know it. And I think it was Stephen Covey was talking about we're born geniuses, but the way our system, our culture and whatnot, we de-genius our children, and we are genius. So we're born with that there's something there, because a lot of times people have this idea, and when I give workshops and whatnot, people that work with other people says, well, how do I do this or do that? I said, you're not fixing anything. You're just helping what's already there get access, help people get access to their greatness. It's already within them, and so when I talk about being unlocked, I mean, we have to figure out how to access the greatness within and express it. So Martin Buber in the book, The Way of Man, he talked about that each person has a divine spark that's encrusted in a shell, and that we have a system of hideouts. So we hide from that. This is the thing. This is how we do it. And he talks about in the Bible, when God asks Adam, wherefore art thou? He's not asking him where he is in a physical place, because he knows that. He's basically saying, hey, I've allotted so many years to you. What have you done with it? Where are you? Are you aware? Are you responsible for your potentiality, for your greatness? Are you allowing that greatness to express itself in service for the greatest good? And so that's what it comes down to, is we don't even know we have it. And so people talk about it in different ways, but we have this unlimited potential within us. we can have access to it, but it's an inside job. Only you can do it now. So it's, as you folks, what you're doing, what I do, we can remind people who they are. We can point them back into it, but they have to do it. That's what makes it so exciting and so frustrating, because no one can do it for you. You have to do it for yourself. So when I talk about unlocking, I'm talking about the masterpiece within, which I talked about in my first book, The Mindful Athlete, Secrets to Pure Performance. I said there's a masterpiece. You can call it whatever you want, but having access to it, a lot of times you can get access from prayer, meditation, service. But the main thing is to be still and know. And sometimes I say when you're working on something, there's a still small voice inside of us. There's something when you play sports and you get in the zone or you get in the flow, you get access to that. There's a wisdom and creativity that's beyond, it's unlimited, and we can't even describe it, but it's there, and we can have access to it when we can drop into that silence, when we can get rid of all the noise and clutter and just be. And so when the Bible says, be still and know I am God, whatever, but it's be still and know. So that still small voice that's inside of us that's easily drowned out. We have to figure out how to not drown it out, but to listen to it. We've all had this experience where we know something, and something tell us, well, don't open that door. Or something, answer that phone or whatever, and we don't do it. Or something says, answer the phone or go to the door, and we don't do it. And then afterwards we realize, oh, I didn't listen to myself. I got to start to listen to that wisdom inside of me that knows. And so that's the idea, is when I talk about the masterpiece, I'm talking about that potential, that divine spark that's encrusted in the shell, and our job is to open it up or unlock it.
Right. It's like, what was it? Who made David the statue? Is that Michelangelo?
Michelangelo.
Yeah.
When he says,
that's it.
I didn't make the statue. I released it. Right. I chiseled the stone away, and David was there.
Yeah.
I love
exactly
that.
It. I use that example, the masterpiece within. That's what I call it, the masterpiece within, because it's there. You just have to chip away. But the interesting thing is, Michelangelo was chipping it in from the outside, and what we're doing is we're chipping away from it in the inside.
I love that.
Right.
So it's like the chrysalis, right?
Yeah.
It's like with that butterfly. And if somebody comes along, like this young boy did when he found one in the wild, this is a story I've read about. And the little being was trying to get out, and he took a little scissor to help it out. And when it came out, it was this ill-formed thing, and it just fell and died. And the moral of the story is that the struggle to get out of there is where you get the strength to fly.
Right. I love that one too.
No, I like to say it. No struggle, no swag.
We're going to ask about that later.
You got to deal with the discomfort. As M. Scott Peck said, life is difficult, but once you accept that life is difficult, it's no longer difficult. And that's the whole thing about mindfulness and being aware, being mindful of how we're being. And this idea of realizing that by not saying yes to life, by not embracing what you're doing, you don't have the ability to accept it. And once you accept it, then you can do something about it. And so that's what M. Scott Peck, I can read the whole, it's the first line of his book, actually, The Road Less Traveled. Life is difficult.
Yeah, actually, I just ordered that book because of what you talked about. I think I was listening to you on Tim Ferriss, and he asked you like some of your, most profound books that you've read, and the Bible is definitely up on that list. The one by Peck, and I can't remember the other one that you had mentioned. But I'm really excited.
There's a lot of them, and I keep going back to them. I keep rediscovering them, and this idea, because Viktor Frankl and his book, Man's Search for Meaning, he's saying the same thing in a different way. Right. He says, when you find meaning in suffering, it ceases to be suffering.
Yeah,
that's such a powerful book.
And that's why it's, but we have this ability to hide out. Like we said, that's what Buber says, we have a system of hideouts where we hide out from reality. We hide out from ourselves mostly.
Right.
And so when God asked Adam, where were you? And he said, I hid myself. Well, he wasn't just hiding himself from God. He was hiding himself from himself. And so this is why it's the masterpiece within. And it's a book by Eric Fromm, wrote a lot of books, but I believe it's the one he wrote. He said, man has to be himself, but he has to be for himself.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
and we get tied up with, we're not supposed to be selfish and work on ourselves. We're supposed to just be focusing on other people. But it's
Mm.
one of my Georgisms is you got to be selfish to be selfless.
Yeah. Agreed.
So
Agreed.
that's, and anytime you get on a plane, they tell you that, or put your mask on
Yep.
first, because you
That's
can't
right.
help somebody if you ain't
Yeah.
conscious, which is kind of interesting, isn't it? If you
Yeah.
lose consciousness, you're in trouble. If you
Yeah.
lose the ability to be mindful, you're in trouble. You got no shot at figuring stuff out.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing I really enjoyed reading your book is like how selfless you are in the service that you're continually providing, wherever. I mean, in so many different places, like, and now you're still continuing to serve. And it just really, it brings that divine spark, from within that you talk about in the book. But like, I mean, you work with some of the greatest modern athletes, what did you, learn from working with elite performers like, Michael Jordan, Kobe, Shaq, Phil Jackson? Like, what'd they teach you? Or what was that experience like?
Yeah, well, everybody's different, but at the same time, it's it just they are more in the public, and people see them, and they're, but there's, like they say, most people have quiet lives of desperation, and I believe there's a lot of people that have quiet lives of inspiration, of being great, of being Mamba, like being Jordan-esque. But we don't we don't go out and tell people about that. But the thing is, they're on the main thing is they figured out how to unlock. They figured out how to embrace their greatness and to share it with others. And it's a challenge. Just like it's a struggle. It's a struggle. You have to struggle. I talk about it in my book, The Mindful Athlete. You have to be comfortable being uncomfortable, because we don't really talk about this a lot. But I don't know if I have a coin here, but one side of the coin is potential, and the existentialists, they talk about that quite a bit. And the other side of that coin is anxiety, uncertainty. So they come together. And so the more the closer you are to your greatness, the more you're exposed to anxiety, uncertainty. And sometimes it's our interpretation. Something happens and we interpret anxiety that says, oh, we bit off more than we can chew, or I don't want to be here. I should have never given up what I was doing, or whatever. Instead of saying, oh, it's just telling me I'm out of my comfort zone, and is a teacher. It's something for me to get here. See, that's a totally different thing, because as an athlete, these athletes have in common, they're under tremendous anxiety.
Yeah. I mean, coming from being in the public eye, and
The closer you are to greatness, the more anxiety you're going to experience. But it's your relationship to it that allows it to be a stepping stone instead of a roadblock. And that's the challenge, because we have this illusion that if we're strong, we don't experience fear, doubt, and anxiety. We don't want something too badly, or we don't get so afraid that we're paralyzed. We experience that whole range of emotions. I call them hindrances, sensual desire, ill will, this idea of sloth and torpor. It could be apathy or low energy, worry, restlessness, doubt. We experience those emotions, and it's our ability to be mindful of them. This is what mindfulness helps us with, is the ability to see them and understand that, for instance, the mindfulness is like the hub of the wheel. It allows you to just see. It's this mirror mind. It just reflects what's there. But to be mindful, you have to have enough faith to make the effort. And the effort's got to be right effort, which means it's got to be balanced with concentration. And it also says that if you have a lot of wisdom, or you have a lot of information, if it's not balanced with faith, you become cynical. And if you have too much faith and you don't verify it, you become polyandrous, and you just say, okay, I believe that, instead of seeing if it's true. And so in my book, The Mindful Athlete, I talk about this idea of the 5 superpowers, because you might think about it, me coming from recovery, it's like when I had approached that, in the big book, it talks about our basic dilemma is a lack of power. But there is one that has more power. May you find them now. And the interesting thing about the 5 superpowers in mindfulness, right effort, right concentration, faith, and wisdom or insight, those things are, to be mindful, to be in the moment, those things are operating interchangeably. Is mindfulness by itself is not enough. but it has to be, like I said, but being mindful helps you balance, like say, insight and faith, helps you balance effort and concentration, because you need a steadiness. It has to be right effort. Is a steadiness. It's an effort that it is seeing things and coming from a place of like service rather than self-interest, if you might say. But it's really more about it's just doing the thing, because what this comes down to, and we like talking about being in the zone and flow. People get to understand that stuff. What it comes down to is just being in the moment and being fully self-expressed. That's what it comes down to. And Joseph Campbell talked about this. People want it. Well, he said, I don't think people are sort of seeking meaning, although you find meaning. He said, I think people want the experience of being fully alive, fully engaged, fully in the moment. So does it really matter what you're doing in the moment? Yes, on some level, but on another level, no, it doesn't. It's like you're doing what you're doing for the activity in and of itself.
Right.
Like, and this is what Chick sent me how I talked about. Just being in the moment and embracing the moment as it is, and bringing as much love, compassion, and understanding to it as you can. And that's possible for all of us. And so people think meditation is this, okay, we're going to sit and be quiet and then the mind will be set. Yeah, that's one way. But there's a couple of philosophers, Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg, and they said, I got my mind on money, money on my mind.
Yeah.
That's meditation.
Classic.
So it's really about what your mind is on. That's why being mindful of what your mind is on, because you are not what you think you are, but what you think you are.
Wow.
So you
have to pause there for a second to think about that one.
Yeah. Strangest Secret by Earl Nightingale. You know what the strangest secret is?
No, please tell us.
We become what we think about.
Yeah.
And Emerson said that we become what we think about all day long. So we don't understand. We think thoughts are just things, but thoughts are thoughts that have an impact. They have an energy. And so part of the mindfulness is being mindful of thoughts without being lost in them, being mindful of how we're seeing things, being mindful of what we're experiencing and whether or not we can change what's happening. We call that self-regulation. So you can regulate your thoughts, feelings, behaviors. So mindfulness by itself is not enough, but being mindful and having enough insight or enough information that says, well, what am I being mindful of? And when I'm mindful of this, and there's a right mindfulness and a wrong mindfulness. So if I'm mindful out of greed or fear, which a lot of us are dealing with now, and anxiety, uncertainty, that when we're coming from those glasses, that puts us in survival mode. So we're in the fight, flight, freeze, and we're not in the growth mode. We're not in the rest and digest, or we're not in the growth mindset. And why is that important? It's important. Why? Because on a cellular level, there's a book, the gentleman Bruce Lipton wrote a book called The Biology of Belief. And he said on a cellular level, you're either in growth mode or survival mode. So you're either, and you see that the best defense is to go to offense, right? Or, if you're on your heels, you can't be on your toes. So our job in the self-regulation, because we some bad mode foes, we can do this. We need to know when we're in survival mode. And sometimes that's appropriate, because when the reptilian brain tells you that there's danger and you're walking across the street, without you having to contemplate and reflect, it moves your ass out of danger. But we don't have a lot of that, because we don't live in the woods. But this is the reptilian brain, 5 million years old or whatever, that is programmed that way. But we have to understand, okay, so I'm in survival mode, and then being able to notice that, and then be able to get back into growth mode. And that is when we ask, well, what's the lesson? What is this? How do I want to relate to it? So the mindfulness is good, but having the right intentions and being able to understand how do you do it. But the first thing is to understand that I'm in survival mode, and just being in that, accepting it, embracing it, creating space around it, and investigating, what's going on. What is this? And I know if I stay in survival mode, I won't see the opportunities, because I'm going to be in the reptilian brain, and the reptilian brain job is to look for danger. So 9 out of 10 thoughts are going to be negative, not personal. So if we know that, then we don't have to believe what the mind is telling us. But sometimes we have to. So this idea of reflecting and understanding what's happening is so huge. And I'm sorry, I just kind of went into this, but this is what it comes down from moment to moment. We have this opportunity to ask ourselves, what's my intention, or what thoughts am I entertaining, because that's going to affect who I am and what I do.
Yeah,
sure,
exactly.
And those thoughts are going to come out of whether I'm in survival mode or growth mode. So what glasses do I have on? If I have on the glove glasses or the growth mindset, then I can do something. If I have on the fear, then we're probably not going to have a conversation. We're probably going to have an argument, or I might throw a couple of F-bombs. Because I'm feeling like you all are not friends, you all are enemies, and I gotta either dominate you, or now the reptilian brain, now you're a threat, and I gotta deal with the threat. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
go through this all day with ourselves, with our loved ones, especially with our loved ones, but they know how to push those buttons. I'm just saying.
Oh my goodness.
You know what I'm saying? And there's a line in Marvin Gaye's song, "What's Going On?" He says, "Well, it makes you want to holler and throw up both your hands."
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
just
it makes
surrender.
you want to holler, throw up both my hands.
I feel that with my kids sometimes.
Yeah. So I'll be quiet, and you guys can ask.
No, this is awesome, George. Hey, we didn't bring you on the show to hear us self-speak, so this is great. So something that popped into my mind when you were talking there about mindfulness and it being an effort, right? In the book, you talk about Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, the father of flow, but you also mention, the phrase effortless effort. And specifically, you talk about teaching Kobe that the best way to score was by trying not to score, trying without trying. Can you break that down for us? And then outside of basketball, how does that apply in life?
It applies, because and Viktor Frankl talked about this. He called it hyper intention. So if you try to do something, you don't do it. So let's just talk about Kobe. So if you look at it, and he's thinking, okay, I want to score 32 points a game. So from a linear point of view, you're looking at, okay, these 4 quarters, I just score 8 points each quarter. Fine. So first quarter, he scores 2 points. Then the second quarter, now he's got more pressure to not score 8. He got to make up 6 points. So, and usually we want to make it up right away. So we want to get back on track. So you got to score 14 points. And then, so it's controlling what you do unconsciously. So when you focus on the result, you miss the moment. If you focus on how you're doing, you're not focused on what you're doing. And so what I open him up to is like, why limit yourself to 8 points? Just want you to just be open and just take it the game as it comes. So he has 16 points in the first quarter. See, now you're open to all the possibilities, and not just possibilities based on you achieving, and you're in this little box where you're only looking at opportunities to score instead of allowing the game to come to you. And then now you're coming from that relaxed receptivities. Now you're being mindful of all the opportunities, not just opportunities that you think are going to help you achieve your goal. Does that make sense? And so it's like, and it's interesting because I send a post to a couple of my friends, and one of my friends is Phil Jackson. And I think it was one of the NBA players was talking about reading my book, The Mindful Athlete, and how it changed him. So I sent it to people. So I said, okay, it's interesting. People are seeing this. And he reminded me that in the Zen tradition, we talk about, or even in meditation, you do something, but without gaining ideas. Because when Kobe was doing what he was doing, he had a gaining idea.
Right.
So if he doesn't have any idea, if there's nothing there, if you get let go of all that stuff, if there's nothing there in the moment, that's one side of the coin. But the other side of the coin, if nothing's there, everything's there.
Right.
So
well, you're
we're talking about
the moment.
possibility here. Opening it up and just being open to everything, because you have a limited view. So you're telling the universe, you're telling yourself, I only want to focus on this. I don't want to be open to all the other opportunities. So now you're on channel 5 instead of, you got 400 channels. So you got to be able to say, okay, you do a search, or maybe you have an AI program or whatever, but there's something about the wisdom inside where if you're just open and you'd be still, there's a wisdom that knows, oh, go to channel 7.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that's what you need. Or, you have books. You guys probably have that. You have books on your shelf. One book falls down, and it's the exact book you need to
oh yeah, it's
need
strange how that
need
works,
something
right?
out of. And you had it up there
Yeah.
for 5 years.
To the exact page
Yeah.
that you need.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, was that Kobe's mindset when you were working with him? Like, hey, I 8 points a game, 32 for the, 8 points a quarter,
Well,
32 points a
yeah.
game, and
Well,
then
I
you
think
helped
he
him
was
kind of,
he
yeah.
was trying to make an impression.
Okay.
And it seemed to me like he was trying to score 35 points in one shot.
Wow. So he's like
So,
forcing it, forcing the
yeah, you're
moment.
forcing it, and then
Right.
and then the thing is life is flow. Basketball is flow. If
Yeah.
your sphincter is tight, you ain't gonna be able to do stuff. You're gonna choke. I'm just saying.
Right. No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
So you have to find a way of be open, be vulnerable, and being willing to embrace the unknown moment as it arises. Because the reality is we don't know what's going to happen from moment to moment. So there has to be a level of vulnerability. But if you don't have faith, if you don't have an understanding of, okay, I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know that with the mindfulness, I can create space. And in that space, I have the freedom and power to choose. I can actually see what's happening and in real time make a choice that's in alignment with my goal, in alignment with my intention is. That's why being clear about your intention and having an understanding of, okay, you go over the plan, this is how I'm going to approach this game. But then when the game comes, you got to let all that go and just be in a moment and let the game speak to you. That's what mindfulness does. Mindfulness is a way of allowing things to speak to us in its own language. So we're creating this little space in the perceptual process where it's coming and we're not just knee-jerk, oh, that's this. Because the thing about it is we put things in categories and associations, associative thinking, abstract thinking, and what that does, it muddies the moment because what we had before was then. Now everything is new, so we have to have this beginner's mind and this ability to see things in new and fresh ways. The same thing, especially the same thing, can you see it with a beginner's mind, with an openness to let it speak to you in its own language, and in that little pause, you see something and you start connecting, seeing how things are connected. Does that make sense? But it's so simple, it's profound because all you have to do is just, Yogi Berra said, you can see a lot just by observing, right? This is so simple that we don't do it. But the real deal is, might there be a payoff for not paying attention? Because it's usually a payoff or a juicing that has to do with us doing something. And so if we're not aware, then we don't have to be responsible.
Right. Right.
So you said, things are connected there. And if you're not paying attention, you'll miss how they are connected. And then you talked about basketball being flow, right? And for our listeners, George roomed with Dr. J in college, and George was a big time basketball player himself, and then had a major injury that ended up leading to some major addiction, painkillers and heroin. Let's talk about that for a little bit, George. Your struggles with addiction. How was life different for you in living with addiction or living in addiction from where you are now? And then how did you get past that addiction?
It's like walking in the mist. When you dabble a little bit, and then basketball kept me just on the straight and narrow. But then when I didn't have basketball, I didn't know who I was. And of course, I had chronic pain, so I noticed that when I took the pain, I was able to be uninhibited. I was able to relate to people and do things because I was very quiet and whatnot. And so it was slow. So it was gradual. And then that's the thing about addiction. You don't think anything's happening. You think you got it under control until you don't. And then when it became, but I was a functional substance abuser. I used alcohol, drugs, whatever. At some point it was whatever altered my consciousness. But when I got clean, coming up on, it's funny because a friend of mine came and took me to an AA meeting on April Fool's Day, April 1st, 1984. And it took me to July 30th when I went into detox. But that's when I got a glimpse that, oh, he's just like me, but he's sober now and he seems happy. And I went to this meeting. It was the AA meeting. And of course, it was really challenging because I'm kind of quiet, alone. I don't like being around people. too many people anyway. So, but I got the sense that there was something there. I had that the possibility existed for me to be clean and sober. Because up to that time, I thought I was going to die of being a drug addict or dying in an institution or jail or something like that, because that's where it goes. So once I got in there, and then once I started understanding that that is about the spirit, is a spiritual. The spirit is the life, the mind is the builder, and the physical is the result. That's Edgar Casey talked about that. So once I started saying, I was looking for the wrong spirit. I was looking for John Barleycorn instead of, the spirit of, but I wanted to alter my consciousness. I wanted to connect to higher consciousness. And it didn't have to be through a bottle or through some kind of addiction, but the addiction was kind of altering consciousness. And so once I discovered that, and for me, it's interesting because how I got clean was, and how I started accessing myself. So I would say the addiction was what, the crisis was what got me to get into a process of unlocking. Okay. And then once, because my ass was on fire, that's what I call it. It wasn't because I thought it was an intellectually stimulating experience or that it was the right thing to do. No, my ass was on fire, and it was like freedom was just another word for nothing else to lose. Everything I tried, my best thinking kept me high. And then once I decided to shut up, take the cotton. Well, somebody told me this. It would be child abuse now, but they used to tell me, take the cotton out of your ears, put it in your mouth, sit up front and act like you don't know anything. And that was it. And there's a power higher than yourself that you can develop your concept of a higher power or how the universe is friendly. But all you need to know is it ain't you, your ego. But, you can do that. And so when I got connected to something greater than myself and realized that this, there's a spirit, there's a font that we can connect to. There's an energy that we can connect to, and it's an inside job.
Yeah. Right. Well, you talked about some of in your book, like the dark times.
Does it make sense what I said?
It does.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it does. Exactly. And I mean, go in this, if you will, like some of those darker times and maybe when you didn't feel like you can overcome, and then what kind of pulled you through? Like what was, to overcome? Yeah, please.
There's a saying when I first came around, and they said something like, there will come a day when no power on earth can stop you from taking a drink or a drug. And I had been, I did it on a download because it is really, the context was I was working in government I was working in the military industrial complex. I had secret clearance, and so me having addiction or even an alcohol problem could cause me to lose my security clearance, and I lose a job. But the other part of it was because I was an IV drug user, so I had tracks, so I always wore long sleeve shirts and stuff like that. But so when I went into the detox, it was in alignment with, because I worked in this, we had a factory, a manufacturing part of it, and we had a three-week shutdown in August. So I timed my 3 weeks, 21-day detox to the 3-week shutdown. And so when I went back to work, I had all this money, waiting, 3 weeks worth of pay waiting for me. And the obsession came over me to use. And what I did was I hadn't been doing meditation and stuff to that point, but I knew enough. I went into the bathroom in the stall, and I didn't get on my knees, but I just sat on it and just prayed, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I repeated that as a mantra, and the obsession, the compulsion was removed. Now, when I talk about the masterpiece within, I don't know what the hell told me to do that, but that's what I did. And I just listened to that still small voice told me to do that. And it was, and then that's when I said, oh, that's fine. But I'm going through all kinds of stuff. And the thing that helped me through that process, I remember thinking two things. I'm right where I'm supposed to be, and God or the universe doesn't give me any more than I can handle. And part of that means that the power behind me is greater than any problem in front of me. So it's like the prayer, meditation, and the service, man. I was very involved in H&I. So I go into institutions and talk to people. The detox I was in, I used to go in So that was a big part of it. This idea of you got to give it away to keep it. And this idea of, if you want to learn something, teach it. So those are the kind of the things that kind of were the foundation, but it was a spiritual foundation. It was understanding that this is a friendly universe, and I just have to align myself with how things work, align myself with these principles that don't change, like, love, compassion, seeking to understand. And so to me, that's what it was. It's about understanding how I work. And then it got me thinking, well, I was able to do this. A lot of people can't. So what's that? So I got involved in motivation and when asking the question, how can I help others experience what I experienced? And so that was it. That was how I got to things, and having friends, taking refuge, in the Buddhist tradition, they talk about taking refuge in the Buddha or your masterpiece, your Christ consciousness, whatever, the Dharma, the lessons, the teachings, and it doesn't matter if it's what it is, 10 Commandments, whatever it is, and the Sangha, having community of people, like in recovery, you have this fellowship, and we talk about recovery, fellowship, and unity. That's what's on my medallions. Pull one up here. So yeah, so it's that thing, the fellowship, which is kind of interesting for an introvert to have to go into that
right.
stuff.
I'm right there with you though, George. I'm a big time introvert.
So actually it's four. It's self, God, service, and society. But initially, then that's another program. But it was like everything was spiritual, physical, mental, and spiritual. So I started to understand that the physical part, I've been dope sick, all of that stuff. That's, believe it or not, as challenging that is, that might last 72 hours, but it's the mental and the spiritual part of it that, and then I had emotional part of it, that, so that I have that addiction is always going to be there, but if I don't feed it, it's not a problem. And so understanding that and understanding the level of consciousness, at the level of consciousness I'm at now, and that's why they talk about improving conscious contact with God or higher power as you understand him or her, praying for praying for their support and all of that, and the power, praying for their will and the power to carry that out. So to me, it's like at the consciousness level I'm at now, taking a drug or a drink or even stinking thinking is not available to me because I'm focused on other stuff. And so whether you're in recovery or not, the idea is how do we raise our consciousness level to a level of, not only acceptance, but, unconditional love, seeing beyond the illusion of separateness and understanding that I am responsible. Now, maybe not what happens to me, but my response to it. So taking personal responsibility and realizing I make choices. And even when the choices are reactions, I still get to choose. And when I make the wrong choice, I can always change it. Does that make sense? So it's a spiritual, and that's what I got in the program, that it's a spiritual program. But I think life and M. Scott Peck said spiritual growth and regular growth are the same, but there's no difference. So the idea is how to keep evolving and changing and getting to a place where I get beyond the illusion of separateness. I get to understand that suffering is something that happens. Is your relationship to the suffering that matters, and that things are impermanent. They're always changing.
Well, what would you say to people that are suffering with some sort of addiction out there, whether it's drugs, booze, sex, porn, or the workaholic? Like, where's like a good place to start? Like, I mean, you really talk about the spiritual aspect of it, but
because
in these, yeah, go for it. Yeah,
like I said, no power on earth can stop you. You got to go to a high
yeah.
You got to, and that's what happened.
There you
and
go.
I didn't understand that till that day came. But it's the same. It's like, but you have to be realistic. It's like you have to get a vision of possibility, create a vision of possibility that says, oh, I there's a way out, and then be willing to do it. But the challenge with that is, and I talk about it in the Mindful Athlete, if your ass is not on fire, you're not going to do it. There's got to be a sense of urgency, and I call it AOF method of motivation, and that's what got me. I was tired of being sick and tired, And so now I've evolved. So all I need is a little heat on the cheek, and I know I got to change. I don't have to have it fully inflamed. See
I
what I'm
love it.
saying? So it's like, so everybody's different, but it's like, but you have to really want to, because a lot of times we say we want to, and you can hear people say, well, I want to do it for my kids. I want to do it for this. That's some bullshit. That's some bullshit. You got to do it for you. And you got to understand that there's a way there, but you may not be ready. And to me, because it took me a long time, but once I saw the possibility, then all I did was take the same energy I used to use to chase drugs and alcohol and use it to chase recovery.
Yeah.
And then work in service, it seems like,
The service is from day one, because
and
the
higher
funny thing
power
about service is the best way to find yourself is forget yourself in service. So that's one of the you try to help somebody else that's suffering, and you forget about your stuff. I mean, I even do it now, with things get, things are crazy. There's a lot of things that we're all dealing with. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll just text a bunch of people something inspirational. I'll call out and reach somebody and tell them how much I care for them. But the gratitude practice and the forgiveness practice, these things are really, really huge for altering the consciousness and getting us out of the survival mode, or the, oh, woe is me, or, I don't have enough money, or, I got 90 things to do and I don't have enough time. And then you realize that maybe you just got to say, okay, I can't do everything. What's the most important thing? So talk about what's important now, or just make the next play. Do what you know to do in this, and then the next step will be given to you. So these are things, because I went to Sunday school, and Sunday school didn't leave me, but it's not like I'm spiritual. I'm not a Buddhist. I'm not a Christian. I just am, and whatever works, so whatever, whatever philosophy I take from this one, that one, take what I like, leave the rest. But I find something that works for me. But it really does come down to this idea of, and it's interesting because I did a couple of podcasts, and they asked me 3 things I know, and I didn't know it. Unbeknownst to me, I said the same 3 things in 2 different podcasts. And the 3 things are: the only time we have is now, the only one I could be is me, and all you need is love.
Wow. The Beatles, right?
So
seems like
who you are, what you're doing, that's it.
Right.
That's it. That's the only time. And you can tell yourself, well, yeah, but you can live through the default future, or you can be in the future. And it's kind of vulgar, but when I first got in recovery, they said if you have one foot in yesterday and the other foot in tomorrow, you're doing something today. You're pissing all over today, or something like that, right? So, but you're not here, and the only time you have is now. But obviously, what you do now has an impact on what happens in the future. But we want to make sure we don't keep repeating the history, the past. So you got to make peace with the past. Well, a big part of this is forgiveness and making peace with the past, especially with ourselves. That's huge. I mean, we don't talk about it a lot, but forgiveness, forgiving ourselves and others, gratitude practice, focusing on what's right. 3 things to be grateful for. That's a happiness practice. Sean Accor suggesting is research. You write down 3 things every 24 hours. It could be 5 or whatever, or you say them out loud, things to be grateful for. And so I know that a big part of it is getting your mind into growth mode.
Yeah, I want to come back to the service, and then also, if you got 1 foot in yesterday and 1 foot in tomorrow, what are you doing to today? The service piece makes me want to come back to your teaching mindfulness. Actually, you called it something else in the book. You called it affirmative awareness. And I love that kind of reframe, because like you mentioned in the book, the term mindfulness has all these connotations, these preconceived notions that come with it. But you're teaching mindfulness to inmates in prison. How is that received there? And then what is the common thread? You've worked with these superstars, Jordan, Kobe, Phil Jackson, Shaq, and many others. And then you're working with these inmates in prison. One, how is mindfulness, or affirmative awareness, as you called it, received by these inmates? And then what's the common thread between these inmates and the superstars that you work with?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I worked in multiple prisons, and everybody's different, and you can't, we tend to, for convenience and for efficiency, we put everything in a box, but everybody's different, and you always got to take the content to the context. So even though I work with inmates, it depends on not only the energy, the environment, but also their state of mind, my state of mind. There's all these different things, but the reality is, I used to tell people, yell at jail, locker rooms, or boardrooms. If you got a mind, I can work with you. So, so it really is. It's always about, you got to know who you are. You got to know who, even if you don't know who you are, know how you're being, so you can change it and start to get in touch with who you are. Because it's authenticity is more important than winning or anything else. It's just being true to yourself. And then you hear it, to thine own self be true. Know the truth, and it shall make you free. Knowing which way is true north. And so the thing is just really helping people to unlock and helping people to decide who they want to be. It sounds like it's so simple, but every context is different. So how I would relate to people. But the interesting thing was, there was this one institution in the prison where, because a lot of times when I go to different places, I can't just talk about everything. In those days, I couldn't use words like spirituality and certain things. You had to be really. But when I used to go into the prison where the lifers were, I went into this one institution when I was working with lifers. They were doing double life and life. They're never getting out. And those guys used to thank me for coming in there to teach them. So, because I think on some level, when you're in prison, at least my experience is, you could be there 10 years and still be in denial about being there. But at some point, it's going to hit you. And once you embrace it, you're there. They were more free than some of the people outside. And I ended up, one of my first lectures or Dharma talks I gave was freedom as a frame of mind. Because, we're all doing time. It all depends on the jail that you're creating in your mind and whatnot. And people in jail, they may not have liberty. They have freedom. Viktor Frankl talked about this in the concentration camp. They didn't have liberty, but they have freedom because they get to choose how they're responding to what happens to them rather than reacting, and choosing life and choosing to relate to it in a way that accesses them to power and meaning.
You say many times in the book, and I really enjoy it, like no struggle, no swag. And, you just talked about your own experiences, and we can use like our own struggles, like, with whether it's addiction, whether it's whatever's going on with you, in order to develop the swag, which is more of your character, which is you developing, chipping away the excess to find, more of that, the masterpiece within. And I think people, like, kind of, they want the cheat code. They just want to know, can I just take the magic pill and like unlock, And you say in your book, and I quote, like, you won't hear me saying I have the answers or follow me. I'm not into that stuff. I'm saying, see for yourself. The idea is for you to have direct experience of the teaching, right? Find yourself, your own masterpiece. I want to help, and I will in whatever way I can. But ultimately, what's right for you, and you have to do it yourself. I want you to be you. So why is direct experience so important for one's ability to unlock?
Because, like I said, you can believe something or you can have faith in something, but you got to verify it.
And what do you mean? Go further. What do you mean? Yeah.
This idea of, like principles. Stephen Covey talks about this, a principle-centered life. And when your values are principles, that's helpful. Why? Because principles are universal, timeless, and self-evident. So that self-evident piece is very important. See if it's true. And when you see it's true, then you know it. It's a knowing rather than it being up here. It's in your being. You actually understand it. You get it. It's a deeper understanding. And when you understand something, it alleviates you from a lot of other, alleviates you from superstitions or having opinions, because everybody has an opinion, and their opinion is based on the one experience they had, and they're not really looking at the context, because we take content and put it in any context and think it's the same. No, the context changes what your view to it. So it's like where things are always changing. So we got to see things in new and fresh ways, because what is happening now is not what happened before. The conditions have changed. We've changed. Everything's changed. So you might come to the same conclusion, but you have to have the same process of being open to seeing things as they are, not as we want them to be, and seeing when we're embellishing them or when we're awfulizing things, because there's opinions that are going in instead of us getting the raw data. and getting a real sense of letting whatever's there speak to us in its own language. So that's challenging, but that's the work. And that's, I can see it very helpful having this. And so when I talked about this idea of intuitive awareness, Ajahn Sumedho calls it reflective awareness. It's awareness without thinking. It's just letting things speak to you, and you don't have to, like, say we're talking, I'm looking at you guys are looking at me. My job is to be aware, and just to be aware of what I'm observing without having to say, okay, well, Will is here and he's this kind of guy, and Jon is here and he's that kind of guy. It's just experiencing you as you are. And of course, I see masterpieces. I'm not looking at the whatever the symptoms are or whatever. I'm seeing the divine spark. I'm seeing a masterpiece. So by seeing that, now I'm relating to you. And here's the interesting thing. We know this from research. When we relate to people, when we see people, it's helpful if we see them as we know they can be instead of how they are, in the sense of not embracing them where they are. But if you see their greatness and you see what the potential can happen, you can see that and you create a space for them to move into that. That's different than seeing you and saying, okay, you're this way or whatever, but just seeing your greatness, that we have this potential. So let's focus on how we're like, and let's level how we see each other with kindness, but as our masterpiece, as that light, as that divinity. And of course it's challenging to do it, but you'll see, if you see somebody beyond their behavior, and I'm not saying doing this and there's somebody who's dangerous and who's crazy or who is kind of, we might even be, might be a sociopath or whatever. It's really more about understanding that how I see you has everything to do with how I relate to you and what I can see from you, because this is where we get in. We put each other in a box. And it's interesting because I live in Boston and I've worked with a lot of elite teams, and none of them were from Boston. I worked with the Lakers, the Bulls, last year with Edmonton, the Oilers. And the thing is, it's like, okay, if you look at it, the Beatles had to leave England to become the Beatles. Jimi Hendrix had to leave the U.S. to go to England to be Jimi Hendrix. And the main dude, Jesus, had to leave Nazareth to become the Messiah, because in Nazareth, he was known as, that's Joseph's son, the carpenter. Yeah. So there's something about this, we put somebody in a box, we don't let them out, man. We just keep them there. And this was stereotyping and all of this other stuff goes, and like being the caste system where the untouchables or people on the other side of the track. We have these ways where we have this illusion of separateness, and we don't have a way of relating to each other on the level of humanity. If we lose our humanity, we make people into things instead of making them to beings, and realizing that all men choose only the good. People, they may not have the understanding because they're ignorant or they're not seeing clearly, but everybody is really trying to say things and do things for their highest good, for their good. They choose only the good. But when you get afraid, you don't think it's enough. So you come from scarcity. So you're not apt to share. You're apt to hoard and to fight off because you feel like you're being threatened. Sometimes you might be. But it's this idea of understanding how we're seeing things, that we have this ability because here's the profound thing. Something happens and then we interpret what it means. Now we have a lot of choices. So as Henry Ford said, you think you can or you can't, you're right. So why not see things and actually, like Casey talks about this in some of his teachings, that something happens, we get to interpret what it means, and why not interpret things in ways that inspire, empower us to do things. And so when I look at my addiction, that's a curse, and people say, why would you talk about that? Well, because I see it as a blessing. I see it as a challenge.
Yeah.
Totally changing the psychology.
Yeah.
And that's what a leader performers, you talk about what do they have in common? Well, they see things as challenges. They have social support, and they have this ability to have positive genius, to put their mind in the growth mode and to see the opportunities, not to see the danger. And this is what happened when I worked with the Bulls in 1993. It's like they were in a crisis. Well, what I offered them, I was working at the stress reduction clinic at the medical center. So, which now is called mindfulness-based stress reduction. But I said to them, okay, here's how we're going to look at this. It's a crisis, but it has two meanings. One meaning is danger. We get that one. But the other meaning is opportunity. So let's focus on opportunity. But we embrace the danger. So it's yes and, it's not either or. It's yes, there's danger and there's opportunity here. So when you're an elite performer, or when we're coming from that masterpiece within, you're seeing it as an opportunity. You're seeing it as a swag moment.
Right. There you go.
You
Opportunity for
understand what I'm
growth, right?
saying? So
More growth.
no
Absolutely.
swag.
More growth.
Right.
Yep.
And I'll tell you the story behind that, because it came out of that wisdom that I talk about. I'm working with this with a French team and volleyball players in California, and I'm talking to the young ladies, and they're just saying, "Man, we want to solve the easier way," and they were doing that. So I didn't get mad and yell at them or anything, but I said, you know something? No struggle, no swag. I got swag. I earned that shit. It's like,
Yeah.
you want, and they
You
love this so
do.
much. They put it up over there, in their locker room, and put up your no struggle, no swag. But it came out of it. It just came out of that wisdom that I'm telling you about, because I live in flow a lot. We all can live in flow. But if we can be still, there's a wisdom, there's a creativity that comes out of that. We know when we get in the zone and flow, but there's flow triggers.
Mm-hmm.
Flow triggers, like seeing things in novel and fresh ways.
Yep.
Complexity.
Right.
These things are really important. Unpredictability.
Right.
That these things that we run away from, they're actually flow triggers.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when you're living more of that unlocked self, like you really begin to, you see the world differently. You see the world as a continual opportunity for growth, to serve, right? To learn something. And, and realizing that, like, hey, it's like every moment is another opportunity. Every moment I can learn something. Every moment I could serve in some ways. I mean, but one thing that has really helps people unlock and really to sit with that divine intelligence, to sit within themselves, to continually put the mask on themselves, is the practice of meditation. Like, why is meditation such a incredibly powerful practice that really helps you to, just chisel away more of that excess that gets in the way of our masterpiece?
Yeah. So it's interesting because you could be mindful. You can have mindfulness and wisdom, like being, mirror mind, and asking questions like, what's my intention? What am I doing? What is this? That sort of thing. You can practice that from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed, you go to sleep. You can be asking yourself, you can have a little, like, how am I feeling? Am I in survival mode or am I in growth mode? We have programs we offer where we offer people, we send them 4 text messages a day, and or ask them things like, if you're in survival mode and growth mode, are you focused on the moment, or are you focused on how you're doing or what you're doing? And the simple things like, what's important now to win or make the next play. These are simple things. It's like, what's needed, or I don't know what to do, but do what's in front of you. Maybe just breathing in, breathing out, and just asking yourself, what do I really want? Because we're so busy doing things, we're not paying attention to what we're doing, and it's habitual. We do the same thing over and over, and the habits, it's like the effortless effort is when we create a neural net. We program ourselves where we just do things without having to think about it. And it's interesting because in the Tibetan tradition, they talk about fabricated and unfabricated mindfulness. So you do mindfulness, you're being mindful, but at some point it's going to be unfabricated. It's going to happen because it's a way of being. It's a habit. So you see these books that are doing fantastically well, like Atomic Habits and Tiny Habits, stuff like that. That's what it is. We are developing habits, but we don't know. So part of this journey of self-discovery, knowing who we are and how we're relating to the world, is looking at our habits, the ones that are helpful. We keep those ones that are not. We need to change them. But some of the habits served us well, but they won't serve us now because things have changed. We've changed. The conditions have changed. I don't know about you guys, but I store stuff. I remember I stored stuff in my mother's house, the house I shared with my mother. I had stuff in there. And so when she passed away, we had to get rid of stuff. And when I got all this stuff, it was so moldy and smelly, you couldn't keep it. And plus, I had 8-track tapes and stuff that, and I had a bamboo putter, if you can believe that, bamboo putter from my golf clubs, and all that. It's all obsolete now. It's obsolete. So this is how life is. Things change, things evolve, and we have to change. And this is part of the challenge. People keep seeing things in the old ways and saying, I'm this kind of person. because you say that, that's what you allow yourself to see in alignment with that. And we have to have this ability of seeing ourselves as potential. And as learners, we have the capacity to learn and grow and evolve, but we have to be willing to pay the price. We have to be willing to make the effort. We have to be willing to create a vision where that's a possibility for us. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so we have to see ourselves, especially being a male, being a man is like, for me, it's like you can be sensitive and strong.
Of course.
You can have intellect and, I think Eric Fromm talks about love and
intuition
and this idea of rational thought, intellect and emotion. People say, oh, emotion. No, emotions are important, but how to regulate them, love and will is what he called it. Love and will. I think it might have been probably one of those psychologists, but love and will, you have to have both. Your heart has to work, but your heart has your head has to work, your heart, your mind, your head, your heart, just your physical, your emotions, they're really important. And we have to regulate them, and they're connected. They're not separate. It's not yes and it's, because when we have emotional content, we're going to remember it, because the emotions are really important. And to be a robot, it's just not satisfying. You can be in the intellect. You get people get stuck in the intellect and they're not connected with their heart.
Right. Yeah. That's somebody else's masterpiece that you're serving in some ways, like when you're a robot. Wow. Yeah, Jon.
Yeah, just I think kind of one last question, or maybe one before our closing piece here. You talked about the power of habit. You talked about atomic habits. What's one mental habit that, for our listeners, that we can all start today to really unlock more of that masterpiece within?
Yeah. Am I in survival mode or am I in growth mode? Do I have on the fear glasses of scarcity, or a fight, flight, or freeze?
Abundance.
Or am I in the rest and digest? Or like I'm asking, well, what is this? How do I relate to it? What's the lesson? But because we're going to find ourselves being in survival mode. But once I have on that fear glasses, now that affects everything. When my mind is right, everything else is right. So the idea is not to deny the fear, the doubt, the anxiety. It's to embrace it. Say, okay, this is it. And I'm going to be with it for a little bit, be with it while I feel it. And then I need to say, okay, so how do I attribute, how do I let go of it and then focus on what I want? So that's why I talk about what's important now. Make the next play. Okay, yeah, that's there, but I still have to do this. This is a book that talks about before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. So what that's really saying is, your life is the same, even though your consciousness changes, but your relationship to it, and it's a way of doing it in a way where, I think it was Donovan, one of the lines in the song was, first there was a mountain, then there was no mountain, then there is. So it's this idea of, you learn something, but then when you have a transformation, when you see it, it's a totally different experience. Does that make sense? So you see it, but then when you really see it, when your consciousness changes, you see it. So it's really simple. It's like asking yourself, what are you thinking? Your self-talk. But the main thing is, am I in survival mode or growth mode? And you'll know, because you'll be in this, and you'll be coming from scarcity, and you'll be in that fight, flight, or freeze. And 9 out of 10 thoughts are going to be negative. You're looking for the danger. And it's okay, but just knowing you're that, and then am I in survival mode? Am I in growth mode? Am I in fear? Am I in love? And it's just acknowledging that. But part of that is because we have the ego and we have this idea of who we are. We won't allow ourselves to see, well, I'm not angry. I mean, I did it when I first came into this stuff. I said, I don't get stressed out. I grew up in the city, man. I'm too tough for that. And then my body was saying, well, I don't know about you, dude, but your shoulders are up around your ears, so there's some stress in here.
So for real.
Then I said, okay, maybe that's right. Then it opened, because I'm telling you, it's challenging when I've had that warrior go through things. It's challenging to let that go, man, and to just be able to say, this power in vulnerability, this power in admitting something, then I could do something about it. I talk about the 4 A's, the awareness of it. That's the mirror mind. Then the acceptance of it, and you can see it, because that's where the struggle is. But once you accept it, okay, I can't manage my life because of my addiction. Then the compassionate action is going to be, then you do that. But you got to have the awareness, because I'll give you an example. Because I'm a teacher and mindfulness and everything, I get angry and I just look at the anger and I never really accept it. I just see it, then try to go to the next thing. Instead of just, because this part of me says, well, if I'm angry, I'm not a good teacher. I'm not a good person. What's wrong with me? Wow, anger is part of it. But just embracing it and saying, yeah, I have it. Then when I acknowledge it, then I can do something about it. And then so the A's are awareness, acceptance, compassionate action, and then assessment. Then you look at it. What worked, what didn't work, what do I need to change? And, what do I need to learn and practice so that I can get it done? Because a lot of times just knowing it's not enough. You got to keep doing it, because you've been programmed to do it a certain way. It's going to take a certain amount of time. But the interesting thing is, when you get real clarity, sometimes, it's just there. You just get it. It's like, you just get it. And it seems like it's spontaneous, but a lot of this process is what we call non-declarative or implicit learning. You're learning things, so you can meditate today, and then 2 weeks from now, you're kinder to your neighbor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
And it didn't come from no place. It came from the work you did. But because we're looking for instant gratification, instant response to what's happening, we're saying, okay, I did that. What's the guiding? That's why gaining ideas, you just let it be there. And at some point you're going to get, oh, wow, I learned this. I'll give you an example, and we can start with this. Back in 1989, I started because I was taking my mother someplace, and, she's getting old, and I had to pull up close to the building. And I said, man, she's not going to be here too long. So I started meditating on her death. And I did that. I remember I had a deaf course. I was living in a meditation center. It was November, I think 11th, 1989. And so I had 12 years to reflect on her death, but that's a practice I've been doing. And so in 2020, when Kobe, I was at the University of Richmond watching a basketball game when I got the text saying he perished in a helicopter crash. We were really close, and I was devastated. But at the same time, I think a couple of days later, my sister passed away. My best friend from college passed away. Within a period of 1 or 2 weeks, I had all these deaths, and I had a peace that was beyond comprehension. And I reflected on it, and I said, I can't really talk to people. They're going to tell me I'm tripping. They're going to think I'm in denial, right? And I thought about it, and I realized, well, dude, you've been practicing this stuff for like 30 years, something years. And so all that practice you put in all those days, now you're seeing the consequences of that. And that's why it's really challenging, because we're thinking it's not working, and it is. It's just that we can't declare it, or it's implicit. It's going to show up at some point. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And that's why we actually have oh, sorry, John, go ahead.
No, I've seen it in my life, as I'm meditating, a couple of days later, I'm like, well, that meditation wasn't really worth it. And then, I don't know, I'll be tried by my kids. They'll be pushing my buttons, and I'll take a breath and kind of do some personal emotional regulation. Or I'll be in a work situation where I want to get upset, and I'll realize, you know what, this is a thought, emotion, and action driven by a stimulus. Let's go back and kind of inject that pause between that stimulus and thought. And that's all, from Dr. Seth Hickerson, our good friend. But that STEA piece, STEA, stimulus, thought, emotion, action, that it can be affected days, weeks, months later from a practice that you did yesterday, right?
Exactly.
So I've definitely felt that in my life.
Yeah.
And we're going to make mistakes, and we're going to get pissed off, and some people are
Sure.
laughing, and they say, oh, George said that's a bullshit. I said, I didn't think he was going to say so. I said, dude, man, let me be. But the thing is you learn from your mistakes, and you're going to make mistakes, but getting out of the habit of making wrong yourself or somebody else. And that's where the compassion, the self-compassion, and saying, okay, when you, like Dr. Maya Angelou, one of her sayings that I love is, When you know better, you do better. Because we have to forgive and forget and keep it moving. But once again, we have to experience the discomfort instead of getting rid of it because it's unpleasant. We don't really embrace that, this is what this feels like. Because see, a lot of times people think that meditation on one level is like you say no to things, like you have some frustration or whatever, and you just direct your attention to something else. But at some point, you got to get intimate with the frustration.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. You got to sit with
the
it.
Fear.
Be curious
Right.
about it.
With the anxiety or whatever it is, and then see it on the. That's why I said, being in your body, then you can notice it as a bare sensation. And now you can create a space for it where you can hold it and be with it and not reacting to it. And then it'll, like anything else, it'll rise and pass away. But as long as we hold on to it and we have opinions about it and we're trying to push it away, it's like we have Velcro. And when we push it away, it's stuck. We can't, we're still attached to it instead of just letting it be and just calmly just divert your attention to something else, but acknowledging, okay, time out. I'm gonna bracket it and put this over here. I'll deal with you later, and just focus on what's going on now.
Yeah. We have one thing we're offering. We have a meditation course coming up, George, in April 27, in order to create that space, in order to understand that you have this ability to just discover this masterpiece, but you need to get out of your way. And that's one thing that meditation really helps you to do. It's to sit with and give you direct experience of your mind, of your emotions, of your body, and how you relate to those things. And it's very important. And just like Jon meditates, I meditate, you meditate, like it's just such an incredible game changer. And it's something I come back to every day because of what we're talking about here. Like it gives me an opportunity to see the world in how it is, surrender with it, exercise those 4 A's so I can continually, just be and continue to live more of the masterpiece and discover more of that masterpiece. But you have to get back to the practice. You have to give yourself, that insightful kind of or implicit direct experience, if you will. It's so incredibly important.
Yeah, and thanks for reminding me because we have we have a Mindful Athlete online course, and
yes,
we have another 6-week study group that starts on April 9th.
Great. Yeah. Anything else you want to promote?
And so people can go to the website and, and every Thursday I do it at home with George. So I have a YouTube channel, but I also have an anxiety masterclass that's out there. And there's other offerings. We have Quick Hitters app on both Google and Apple. People can go in and get some of the core elements or the quick hitters or some of the things I teach.
What's the website there, George? Is it, or where can they find you?
It's on Google and on Apple, in the Apple Store and on Google.
Oh, okay. Oh, what's the name of the
app? Go to the website, georgemumford.com.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, I thought we'd finish. I'm just going to read a little quote from your book, which I thought would be a great way to send our audience off and really honor you because of all the great, incredible wisdom that you've brought to Unlocked, which is, again, just an incredible read. Like this is something, George has already read his own book. I think he said over 20 times. This is something I've already read twice. I mean, I hope everyone picks it up. It's really incredible book that could really help you unlock, truly. But George says, he goes, our world today is stingingly partisan and fraught. So much of everyday life is about winning at all costs by whatever means necessary. We demonize other people and ideas. The air is infused with acrid nastiness. How can we mean what we say without being mean? How can we create a culture where we're willingly generous enough to do things that will advance the greater good? The first step is to go within and discover what's really inside us, who we really are, our essence. There's a whole universe inside of us and more profound discoveries waiting to be made there than anywhere else. Awesome, George. Thank you.
No better way to wrap it up.
Yeah, exactly.
So who wrote that anyway?
Yeah, I know, right? And as our guest always said, I was like, man, that's fucking brilliant, dude. Who wrote that? That's you, George Mumford. And thank you for writing that, because it really, like, this is just really, it's like you can get caught up on all the noise and all the chaos and all the way that we continually divide, or away from each other, or you can really begin to tap in, find the unity within, and you can understand the unity that connects all of us. And that's what's really needed now more than ever. And this is such a great book that's going to really help you understand, how this all ties together and what you can do about it. And you can be that masterpiece. You just got to put in the work. You just got to put up the work and create those discoveries and keep moving forward. So awesome, George. Jon, you want to just do a quick breath or practice?
Will, you can go ahead and lead it if you want to, and have George join us. And then just real quick, George, after we say goodbye, hang tight for a second if you would. So
thank you. Well, something I learned from George, and just a simple arriving practice, and you can just do this for a few minutes. We're not going to necessarily go that long, but just find your seat, or even if you're like, driving, you can probably do this, right? But just find your seat and just begin to find your breath. You can deepen that breath to help slow down, the mind and the body, and help you to kind of get deeper into this moment. And just notice that you're just sitting, you're breathing, and you're knowing it. And this is how we're able to get into the moment, just by feeling our body in this time and space, feeling our breath move through our body, and knowing that these two things exist right here, right now. Just give yourself a few more moments here of just sitting, breathing, and knowing it. Maybe even deepen the breath a little bit more so you can feel more of the experience. Maybe just take yourself down into your sit bones or into your feet and just feel that's real too. And then be the mindful, be the awareness that you are, and just witnessing and watching, and just observing with curiosity that this is the time and the space that is now. All right, one breath to close. Empty all the way out. Feel that seat. Feel the breath. Take an inhale. And let it all go. George Mumford, everybody. George Mumford, thank you so much for being on the show, for all the work you put out in the world. We really, really appreciate you having you here and taking the time.
Thank you, and thank your audience. I appreciate you folks. Love and blessings to everybody. And don't forget, you got a masterpiece, and don't let anybody tell you anything different.
Amen. Thank you, George. Beautiful way to wrap it up.
Yes.
And I can't say anything better than that, so I'm just going to leave it right there. Until next time, everyone, take care. Peace.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Peace.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you walk away with some new tools and insights to guide you on your life journey. New episodes are being published every week, so please join us again for some meaningful discussion. For more information, please check out mentalkingmindfulness.com.